Hello, in this broadcast, the news from the television company Ostankino. For the second day, Russian troops are in Chechnya. Today, again, there were reports on casualties near the village Dolinsky, toward which today a column of the Ministry of Internal Affairs and the Ministry of Defense of Russia moved in. A clash occurred. A group of combat technology supported by aviation, Intertas reports citing the headquarters of the Chechen Armed Forces, attempted to move through toward Grozny, and it was fiercely resisted by the defense forces of Chechnya. According to the headquarters in Dolinsky, which is 20 kilometers from Grozny, and also in the Cossack village the 1st of May, there are casualties. Russian soldiers, as the headquarters reports, have concentrated on farmsteads around these villages and were firing. It's reported that the column moving from the direction of Makhachkala was detained by insurrectionists and residents of Chechnya on the border between the two republics. One more convoy of Russian forces combat technology, after a brief clash with the insurrectionists and employees of state security of Chechnya, this afternoon stepped onto the territory of the republic from the northwesterly direction, a correspondent of Interfax reports. Journalists were not allowed to get close to the site of combat. However, it's presumed that among the troops of the 1st Chechnya covering force, there are casualties. After crossing the Chechnya-Ingushetian border, Russian combat technology regrouped itself into a combat structure. As of 1630, combat technology was within a few kilometers from a second fortified post near the Cossack town Asinovskaya, 64 kilometers from Grozny. According to other information from Interfax, confirmed by the Temporary Information Center, during the day today, columns of Russian troops which were moving to Grozny were fired at from jet-fired cluster installations. The combat helicopters annihilated the cluster artillery installation. It's reported that on both sides there are casualties, the number of which is being clarified. There are also casualties and those injured among the peaceful residents. In the evening, Intertas reported that as darkness fell, clashes near the village Dolinsky had stopped. Interfax reported that in addition to the 46 Russian military personnel taken prisoner, this morning 11 more were captured, and hence the overall number of military prisoners seized in the areas of Dagestan, which border with Chechnya, is approaching 60. Despite yesterday's address of the President, Boris Yeltsin, and the creation along the government line of an interdepartmental task force, the name Grozny, according to the information from the Temporary Information Center under the Russian government, preparations continue for armed resistance by troops and units fulfilling the decree of the President on measures to curtail activities on lawful armed formations in the Chechnya Republic and in the zone of the Osetinian-Ingushetian conflict. More simply speaking, this means establishing constitutional order in one of the parts of Russia. But unfortunately, yesterday demonstrated that regularization in that republic will not be simple. Also, this process began with bloodshed and seizing prisoners. According to several information agencies, yesterday near the border of Chechnya with Dagestan, a group of Russian military was taken prisoner. While, according to the information of the Chechnya Armed Forces, all access points to Grozny have been blocked off, Russian detachments from the Ministry of Defense and Internal Affairs have sustained the first losses on the territory of neighboring Ingushetia. There, 30 units of combat technology flared into action. The Minister of Defense, Pavel Grachev, commenting on these incidents, stated that all this was done with the explicit agreement of the leadership of Ingushetia and with participation of special units of that republic's Ministry of Internal Affairs, which opened targeted fire on military personnel. In essence, Grachev feels Ruslan Aushev has declared war on the President of Russia. Meanwhile, the President of Ingushetia, Aushev, himself turned to the Prosecutor General of the Russian Federation with the request to send a group to the Republic to investigate criminal activities of the military against the civilian population. In this quite dramatic situation today in Vladikavkaz, nevertheless, talks did begin between the representatives of the federal authorities and the warring sides in Chechnya on paths to regularize the crisis. Today, in Vladikavkaz, the task force of the Russian government held parallel talks with representatives of official Grozny and the Chechnya opposition. The commission is headed by the Deputy Minister on Nationalities Affairs, Vyacheslav Mikhailov. The representatives of the opposition have undertaken in writing to cease combat and disarm their militarized groups as demanded by the decree of Boris Yeltsin. The matters are more complicated with the representatives of Jahar Dudayev. In principle, they too agree to disarm, but as an absolute condition, they demand immediate withdrawal withdrawal of troops from Chechnya. Currently, talks are still continuing, and it's difficult to say what the results will be from the dialogues. It's clear in these conditions the Chechnya president probably will have to accept compromise with Moscow, but talks, judging from everything, will be complicated. In the event that agreement is reached, the commission from the government of Russia will have to coordinate its activities with the force ministries. This role is placed on the Vice Premier of Russia, the Minister of Nationalities Affairs, Nikolai Yegorov. The press service of the President of Russia today conveyed the text of the address of Boris Yeltsin to the deputies of the Federative Council and the State Duma. We are united by acknowledging the priorities of the Constitution and the use of political methods, and foremost in talks and resolving the Chechnya problem, it says in it. I feel it's indispensable, the President emphasized, to clarify together with chambers of the Federal Assembly framework conditions for the talks. First, the object of discussions. Does the Russian delegation need to hold talks on the status of the Chechnya Republic within the structure of Russia? Is the Federal Assembly prepared to carry amendments into the Constitution considering all possible political repercussions? Second, the subject of the talks. With which political forces of Chechnya is it necessary to hold talks on these problems? For official talks with Jahar Dudayev, a special decision will be required, legalizing the results of the presidential elections in the Chechnya Republic. 3. The conditions of these talks. Must one view as necessary preconditions for these talks the conducting of free elections in the Chechnya Republic? If yes, then how, in the current conditions, is it planned to conduct free elections? The Chechnya crisis, which threatens the wholeness of Russia, the calm and safety of its citizens, requires immediate resolution, it says in the address of Boris Yeltsin. It's impermissible to use it to ignite tension within society, incite resistance between branches of government, and as a quest for conjunctural political benefit. The Federative Council will convene the 16th of December for a special session to discuss the situation in Chechnya. This was stated today by the chairman of the Higher Chamber of Parliament, Vladimir Shumeyko, after a closed session which he chaired with the chairman of the committees. The Federative Council, according to him, will examine the progress in fulfilling its own resolution on the situation in Chechnya, as well as the address of the President of Russia to the deputies. Vladimir Shumeyko said that forces were deployed in Chechnya to create two isolating rings around the Republic and Grozny to prevent the insurgence of armed groups and weapons as necessary conditions to disarm the conflicting sides and to cease the bloodshed. According to Vladimir Shumeyko, Russian forces were given a strict order not to fire. The results of today's talks, which began in Vladikavkaz, the speaker noted, should be the disarmament of the conflicting sides, and later a new round of talks should be held on restoring constitutional order in Chechnya. The free expression of the will of the Chechen people and the wholeness of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Shumeyko feels, are the main principles during the dialogues. The representatives of the Chechnya diaspora in Moscow, who attended the Federative Council, specifically stated the Chechnya diaspora is in control of the situation not only in Moscow but throughout all the regions of Russia, because we recently gathered here and there were representatives from all regions. All Chechens who live in Russia currently, in Chechnya and on the territory of the Russian Federation, no matter where they may live, they feel that this place is their home. I'm a Muscovite, and I feel today that Moscow is my home, and if anyone here intends to do something, I will be first to impede it. All Chechens are absolutely reasonable people, and they all understand that only a peaceful resolution of the problem can normalize the situation. In Moscow, behind closed doors, a meeting of the Council of the State Duma was held. Today in the Duma it was a day off, and any liveliness in parliamentary corridors was not observed. But by midday, having formulated their positions on the president's methods to resolve the conflict, were leaders of factions and groups. After the Duma Council, they had a special general press conference. The Democrats and Communists, in fact, united and harshly criticized the president for deploying forces in Chechnya. As a result, among the Duma members, Boris Yeltsin is supported by Sergei Baburin, a small group of nationalists, the Liberal Democrats of Vladimir Zhirinovsky, and the Liberal Democrats of Boris Fyodorov. There's an order and a lawfulness. The president has undertaken specific measures and is acting within the framework of the law. Therefore, we support him. There's nothing more precious than the homeland and the Russian state, and we're obliged to defend it. And all this which accumulates around this is nonsense and disorder, which we must put an end to. I'll attempt to explain this to Mr. Gaidar, Mr. Yevlinsky, and Shahrai, to whomever. Behind all these Chechnya anxieties, it was somehow forgotten that today is the 12th of December. Today, Duma automatically loses its immunity, and there's a full chance of being suspended by the president, whom, in this situation, the majority of deputies does not support. Tomorrow, the parliamentarians will gather for a special meeting in order to finally formulate their point of view regarding Chechnya, and it's not excluded that this decision may affect the fate of the Duma itself. At a meeting with the press, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Andrei Kozyrev, regarding the situation in Chechnya and around it, warned of the danger in not dispelling the inertia about the collapse of Russia, inciting anarchy and confusion in the country. Yes, while there is a state, it periodically is required to implement force in order to restore lawfulness and order. Andrei Kozyrev implied that the possibilities of the dialogue process are not exhausted, and the forceful decision is an extreme measure proportionate to the level needed for lawfulness and order. The Democrats will create an impression that they and their ideas, their democratic ideas, are equivalent in meaning to the endless process of collapse, anarchy, and confusion. Then Zhirinovsky and the communists, they will be seen as the saviors of the homeland. Answering the question about his motives for withdrawing from the faction Russia's Choice, Andrei Kozyrev noted he ran for the Duma as an individual candidate because before the parliamentary elections, because of personal ambitions, a sole bloc of democratic forces was not created. He called blasphemous yesterday's act of protest by Russia's Choice on Pushkin Square, where at one time defenders of rights protested against the USSR invasion of Czechoslovakia, which is not the same thing, the minister said. The defense of human rights, freedom of speech, and the battle against national exclusiveness and corruption, these are some spheres, Kozyrev noted, which require efforts of democratic politicians. This is where the battle for democracy lies. This is where our friends, including leaders of Russia's Choice, take the chance to show themselves off in a brighter light. Andrei Kozyrev spoke out against the affirmation that certain forces are attempting to emphasize strict authoritative methods in resolving the country's problems. We just received an urgent message from Tass in which it says that the first group of Russian troops, which was seized Sunday by the civil population in border areas of Dagestan and Chechnya, today was released toward evening. This, a correspondent of Tass was told by an authorized representative of the Council of Ministers of the Dagestani Republic and the Stavropol Rim administration, Abdullah Amarov. The government of Dagestan continues dialogues with the bordering population in the aim of releasing the remaining hostages in the next few hours. First Deputy Chairman of the government of Russia, Alexis Kavets, called the situation in Chechnya controllable. Speaking today at a meeting of the capital government, Alexis Kavets, who is also the head of the operational staff within the government on coordinating activities of federal organs of executive power, announced that the 13th of December at the meeting of the Commission of the Government of Russia on Operational Matters, it's planned to examine the progress in realizing the resolution of the Cabinet of Ministers on immediate measures to restore and develop the economy and social sphere of the Chechnya Republic. Russian regular forces will overcome Chechen groups using heavy weapons and also blockade centers of resistance. However, their aim is not to seize Grozny. This was stated by participants of the briefing held in the Kremlin today. All official individuals who are involved in the operation of deploying forces were given an unambiguous instruction from the president. That means to take under protection and defense of the peaceful population. Hence, this is not the beginning of a Caucasus war, but a strictly local process connected with the disarmament of unlawful armed groups. In the opinion of participants of the briefing, today authorities can be accused of only one thing, that the liquidation of the unlawful regime in Chechnya is late by 3 years. Regarding the apprehension of democratic forces about the threat of the rebirth in Russia of a police state, Georgy Satarov is inclined to see in this echoes of conjectural ideas and the battle for for the presidential post, which has already begun. The presidential aide also feels that the attempt to impeach Boris Yeltsin will fail in the very first stages. Vyacheslav Kostikov feels that the president is controlling the situation in the country and did not exclude that within the next few days he'll participate in meetings with other leaders. Vyacheslav Kostikov also stated that the Chechnya problem was discussed today at the meeting of Boris Yeltsin with the head of the government, Viktor Chernomyrdin, and the first vice premier, Alexis Kovets. The press secretary added that the president sees his goal is to provide for a political solution for the Chechnya problem, guarantee cooperation of all branches of government and responsible political forces. The government of Moscow called on deputies of the State Duma and all citizens to refrain from organizing and participating in unlawful mass acts in the capital. In its address, the Moscow government reminded that violating order, organizing or conducting public actions could bear consequences of responsibility, including criminal responsibility. Yet, despite this, the peace of Alexander Sergeyevich was disturbed again today. The reason is the same as yesterday. Not the Tungus or Kalmyk people, the friends of the steppes, but the children of the mountains, the Chechens. From racketeers and hooligans, they've now become brothers. For that brotherhood, today, democratic and communist organizations spoke out. Both of them agreed that blood should not be spilled and the problem must be resolved peacefully through dialogue. It would seem that the former opponents were on the verge of uniting for peace, but it turned out things were not so simple. The Democrats feel that the entire blame falls on those who surround Yeltsin and misinform him. Communists are convinced that the president is at fault for everything, as well as the Democrats, the Jews, of course, and others. The contradictions could not be dispelled, unfortunately, and unification did not occur. On the contrary, from Pushkin's monument, the communists moved to the side of the Democrats, the stronghold, the movie theater of Russia. Gaja visited the Democrats, suggesting they disperse and avoid conflict. They folded up their banners and went home. The communists remained on the square to celebrate victory. The question is, over whom? This morning, in the Ministry of Emergency Situations, an operational task force met on providing humanitarian aid to the peaceful population of Chechnya in need of evacuation. As the agency RIA News reports, the Minister on Emergency Situations, Sergei Shoigu, adopted the decision to launch a large-scale humanitarian operation. Shuttle flights of the ministry's planes will deliver medications and food to the refugees of the population of Chechnya. In Mozdok, special helicopter units and groups of buses were organized to evacuate residents of Chechnya. To facilitate the unswerving compliance with the Constitution of the Russian Federation on Chechnya territory is an internal matter of Russia. This is said today in the statement of the government of Ukraine today. In the document, hope is expressed that participants of the conflict will apply all efforts to prevent uncontrollable developments in the events. In connection with Chechnya events at Ukrainian nuclear power stations, additional security measures have been undertaken. The events in Chechnya are an internal affair of Russia. This is the reaction of President Clinton. Speaking at a press conference in Miami, he said also that we hope that order will be restored with a minimum of blood and violence. This doesn't regard us. Evidently, this is the position official American authorities have decided to take. Here they understand that any expression of discontent with Moscow will be viewed there as interference. On the other hand, the conflict, if it is not quelled, will threaten to destabilize all of Russia. And this, no matter what they say, in America is not desired. Today's television reports, as always, effectively announce what is occurring and about where Chechnya is located in general. Many Americans have learned what the word Grozny means in English. In a country which is proud of its unity, currently people don't even think those things. For example, how the state of Texas could have suddenly declared its secession from the United States, but American history is also not simple, and once this did happen, civil war is not forgotten here, and Texas still bears the name the Lone Star State. Also remembering here today was the fact that under Gorbachev, the Kremlin deployed forces in Lithuania to defend the Soviet constitution, emphasizing that Lithuania was never considered to be a part of the USSR by the U.S. And about Chechnya, they say it is an inexorable part of Russia. While the American President Clinton refused on Sunday to criticize the decision of Moscow to send troops to Chechnya, saying at a press conference in Miami that this is an internal problem, yet American newspapers willingly are discussing this topic. So the New York Times quotes an expert from the Washington administration on the former Soviet Union who said that Chechnya is a component of the Russian state and was always such. At the same time, from the point of view of the newspaper, today's events will make this coming Thursday's visit to Moscow of the American Vice President Gore and the Defense Secretary Perry much more complicated and delicate. The American observers note that, unlike the majority of other conflicts on an ethnic or national basis which sprung up along the southern borders since the collapse of the Soviet Union, the resistance is unfolding currently in that place which Russia and the rest of the world feel is Russian territory. Moreover, since 1991, not a single foreign country and not a single former Soviet republic recognized the independence of Chechnya and did not doubt the fact that it belonged to Russia. Probably that is the explanation for the reserved and firm position of foreign countries in making no official statement regarding the Moscow decision to bring troops into the Chechnya Republic. The exception to that is the statement of Turkey, whose concern is explained by its territorial proximity to the conflict region. At the same time, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Turkey advocates resolving the Chechnya problem through peaceful means and preserving the wholeness of the Russian Federation. The first anniversary of adopting the new Russian Constitution we greeted today with characteristically specific situations and moods. As is known, the 12th of December was never declared a holiday, and yet today the majority of the Russian population took the day off. Last weekend, Russians observing the events in Chechnya were occupied with another dilemma. So, do we have a Constitution Day or not? And if so, is this date of the calendar marked as a holiday or not? The State Duma refused Russians the holiday, considering the current constitution to be anti-democratic and the manner of its adoption to be dubious. It turned out the president and the government had the last word. The head of state declared the 12th of December a holiday and non-working day, and the government issued instructions for double salary compensation for those working on that day. And so the 12th of December has acquired a holiday status. Is there any call now to toss our caps in the air? Let's examine this calmly. In principle, Constitution Day in any civilized country is a rather noteworthy occurrence for the law-abiding citizen. But in our country, many still are not civilized nor law-abiding enough. The deputies of the State Duma, who exist pursuant to the new Constitution adopted 1 year ago by national election, are not elated over our basic law, and hence it follows over themselves. A paradox? Yes, but how many do we have? The country, as previously, has no lawfully ratified state symbols. There is no officially appointed prosecutor general, nor a head of a central bank. The constitutional court is not functioning. And yet, despite all of this, despite the fact that in the current constitution there are many shortcomings and contradictions, yet the basic legal act of the Russian Federation created and entrenched a new system of power in our country. The constitution guaranteed to Russians a broad spectrum of rights and liberties, entrenched the principles of federal structure of Russia and the foundations of Russian law and order. Not a single legislative act adopted by a subject of the Federation may contradict the federal constitution. Based on that is the source of the decision of the president to disarm all unlawful formations in Chechnya. Therefore, Russian forces are instructed to act in accordance with points D and E, 114th statute of the Constitution of the Russian Federation. Our basic law is undergoing an endurance test today, and the federative principle and unity of state embedded in it are being tested for survival. So, was this Monday a holiday or not, which the people feel was a difficult day? The full-fledged celebration of Constitution Day is only possible in a truly lawful country. We are only on the path toward it, but the ideas embedded in our Constitution are capable of transforming Russia into a free, strong, and flourishing country. There's only one shortcoming. These ideas must consistently be implemented into life. In Miami, at the summit of the Americas 94, a conclusive declaration was adopted on the principles of partnership for the sake of developing and flourishing. For the first time in the last quarter century, heads of states and governments of 34 countries of the Western Hemisphere, except Cuba, gathered together to discuss prospects of cooperation in the economy, trade, culture, and the battle with crime. Participants of the meeting agreed to begin in January of next year dialogues on creating a pan-American zone of free trade by the year 2005. President of Azerbaijan, Tanguy Dar Ali flew today to the capital of Morocco, Casablanca, where the 13th and 14th of December will participate in the meeting of heads of states and members of the Islamic Conference Organization. During the summit, they will examine specifically the question about the Armenian-Azerbaijani conflict. Today, gunmen of the Islamic resistance attacked Israeli soldiers in the occupied south of Lebanon. They fired shells at Israeli posts and blew up a jeep with a patrol of the Israeli army. One Israeli soldier was killed and 7 injured. The advance of Croat forces continues onto Serb territory in the southwest of Bosnia-Herzegovina. Croatia has deployed new units of the regular army, which are now the striking force in the aggression. Leadership of the Serb Krajina has announced its intention to aid the army of the Bosnian Serbs. During the last 75 years, twice a day, behind well-closed doors, in the bank Rothschild & Sons, the prices set on the London gold market, and aligning with it are all central banks of the world. Just as in detective stories, the main action was occurring here, in one room, and the right to be there daily is enjoyed by only 5 people. Few know them personally, but they, in closed sessions, set the prices on the London gold market, and they not only set prices, but arrange physical transfer of ingots from the hands of sellers to buyers, which occurs in an atmosphere of full confidentiality in the same building after the transaction is agreed upon. There's a 6th invisible part of the gentleman's agreement, and that is supply and demand for the gold bullion. According to the main dealer of the bank, Martin Koenig, the demand is defined greatly by how much gold is mined in South Africa and on the territory of the former USSR. A portrait of the wife of Nicholas I, the Empress Alexandra, is in the center of the room on the wall, not by a whim of director's taste. It symbolizes the key role which historically Russia plays in the business of Rothschild's bank. Incidentally, the bank waited quite a while before returning to the search for new partners after Perestroika. This was said in an interview to our program by the director of the bank, Derek Thomas. A little more than a year ago, the choice went to the Russian National Bank, considering the fact that in Russia, trust in securities of local financial structures is not high, mildly speaking. They agreed that the promissory notes of the Russian National Bank will be guaranteed by the Rothschilds Trust Company. And so for now, cooperation has begun, and the next level is possible work together on the Russian funds market. Work, just as in the Rothschilds & Sons Bank itself, is until late in the evening. In western regions of Scotland, the floods went through the worst in decades. The result of torrential rains, certain villages are under 2 meters of water. Because of the timely and precise actions of rescue services, major human casualties were avoided. More than 600 people were successfully evacuated, and 3 people are missing. In the Ryazan district, employees of law enforcement organs prevented the theft of a large quantity of gold. First in Nizhny Novgorod, the militia detained the sellers of the stolen gold, and the chain led to the Privok non-ferrous metal plant, which is in Kasimov in the Ryazan district. Because of the criminal case already launched regarding the theft of precious metals, from here, as you can see, employees of the units of economic crime, the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Russia, the district police, and also counterintelligence agents found gold ingots ready for theft, 19 kilograms at a cost of 800 million rubles. Since July, our group has been conducting a large-scale investigation at the plant. And currently, we have exposed several organized groups which were occupied in the theft of gold. The lack of control, negligent management at the plant facilitated theft of precious metals over a long period of time. The thieves, to smuggle the gold out of the plant, even bored through the walls. Evidently, there is poor control over gold, not only at this plant. During the 11 months of the current year, organs of internal affairs have confiscated several hundreds of kilograms of gold, which is valued at around 7.5 billion rubles. The reasons for gold theft must be removed. This strategic value of the country, a poor economy, inflation, laws not yet adopted, and in our view, the freedom of criminals. It's strange the number of thefts grows, and statutes of the criminal code are becoming more lenient. And again on the criminal topic, during the last weekend in Petersburg, a major theft occurred from the Russian National Library. The entrance into the familiar building on Nevsky Prospect on the instructions of the management for journalists was tightly shut, and the management itself absolutely refused to comment on the event over the telephone. However, we managed to learn that more than 85 manuscripts of ancient philosophical writings were stolen. The earliest of them are back from the 9th century. The resourceful thieves stole the items from a secured chamber. The alarm system did not function, and the guards never noticed. In the department investigating theft of historical and cultural valuables, and the value is tens of millions of dollars. That value is quite conditional because the books are priceless, hence the version is not excluded of a hired nature of the theft. We have instructed all our employees, and we've given information to customs. And using the opportunity, I would like, through your broadcast, to appeal somehow to the residents of the CIS countries. If any signs appear that someone is attempting to sell such items or someone is turning for consultation to specialists, they should inform us. Today, sad news arrived after a lengthy illness on Sunday. In his 91st year of life, the prominent artist, the national actor of the USSR, the laureate of state awards and the hero of socialist labor, cinema director Yuri Razmin. He is the author and creator of films such as The Pilots, Mashenka, Your Contemporary, If This Is Love, The Private Life, and many, many others. But life continues, and at these moments in the Bolshoi Hall of the Moscow Conservatory, a festival of music is ending of the famous composer Vyacheslav Artyomov. This is the first Russian festival of a composer who has permitted the public in 1 week to hear, among other compositions, 10 world and Moscow premieres. Today, in the Bolshoi Auditorium of the Conservatory, 2 symphonies of Vyacheslav Artyomov were performed on the path to a bright peace and quiet existence, which for the first time were performed by the National Symphony Orchestra of the United States, conducted by Mstislav Rostroprovich in the Kennedy Center in Washington. From grandiose theatricalness in which the path of the individual toward moral perfection, the path of Russia on a predestined spiritual ideal path is interpreted through Christ. I am the path, the truth, and life. The compositions of Artyomov took too long before reaching the audience. During a quarter of a century at many plenaries and conferences of Soviet composers, not one of his works was heard. What is your feeling about our days today? I feel that now there is freedom. No one can prohibit or forbid you. And if you are a person who is responsible before God and before people, you may present to them the best which you have accomplished in this world. 15 years later, Moscow again greets the jazz classic B.B. King. With a concert in Moscow, his world tournament begins. I think that you must love me very much, and that's why you specially organized snow. In a moment, Daria Chermonenko will continue with the sports news. Goodbye. Good evening. And now the latest sports news at this hour. During this moment in the Cosmos Hotel in Moscow, the 11th tournament of the World Chess Olympics is ending. One may say with confidence that in the men's tournament, the leader will be the first team of Russia, which beat the Georgian team. In second place is the Russian youth team, which defeated the Ukrainian team. Among the women, there is no longer any doubt that the Georgian chess players will be champions. The Russians, who beat the Moldavians, share third place with the team from China. The Russian Stanislav Pozdnyakov won the first of the seven levels of the World Fencing Championships in France. In the finals, he defeated Vilmos Shabe from Romania. The Ukrainian Sergei Golovinsky has won the match with the Petersburg fencer. In third place are the Olympic champions, the Italian Stefano Cerioni and the French Philippe Panet. The World Cup holder in downhill racing, Katja Zainzinger from Germany, upheld her super reputation in the Canadian Lake Louise. She won the supergiant slalom. The Swiss Heidi Seller-Bacher was ahead by only 0.32 seconds, but is ahead in the overall count. Zelenskaya was 21st, and 30th was Svetlana Gladasheva. Magnus Larsson in Munich won the tournament with a prize fund of $6 million. In the finals, the Swede defeated the world's first seed, the American Pete Sampras. In an interview after the game, Larsson stated that his most important victory was was in Moscow in the Davis Cup finals.
Финансово-строительная корпорация «Экипаж» — это новые комфортабельные квартиры для вас в престижном районе Москвы Кунцево. Мы первые из коммерческих фирм, реально начавшие строительство. Мы уже трудимся для того, чтобы ровно через год вы получили свою квартиру.
Good evening. Atlantic cyclones, which are quickly shifting along the Arctic coast, don't allow true cold to become entrenched in the north of the European part of Russia. And so tomorrow, under the influence of yet another cyclone with a center over the north of Scandinavia, there inclement weather will continue with snow, blizzards, and strong southerly winds. On the Kola Peninsula, in Karelia, 0-5, in the Arhangist district and in the Republic of Komi, -6 to 11. The northwest region, the Baltic countries, will remain under the influence of an area of low pressure. It will be partly cloudy with some isolated rain and wet snow, temperature from 0 to +5. Warm air from the Atlantic tomorrow will reach the central region, and colds will weaken to -1 to 5 degrees. Cloudy skies are expected with isolated snow in morning, evening hours, fog. In the Volgovyatsk area, the weather will remain the same. There will be snow with isolated blizzards, day temperatures -5 to 10. In Belarus, Ukraine, Moldova, cloudy weather with isolated precipitation. In Belarus, during the day, 0+3. In Ukraine and Moldova, as high as +7 degrees. In the central Chernozem area, on the lower Don and lower Volga, in the zone of a cyclone and atmospheric front, expected is inclement weather with abundant snowfall, snow drifts, and icy road conditions. And it will be warmer, 0-5. In the Krasnodar and Stavropol rim areas in the republics of the Northern Caucasus, also cloudy with wet snow and icy road conditions, and accumulation of snow on lines and trees, temperature 0+5 on the coast of the Black Sea, +5 to 10. Beyond the Caucasus, cloudy with isolated rain in Armenia, snow, Georgia and Azerbaijan, +5 to 10 in Armenia, -2 to 7. In Petersburg, partly cloudy skies with some light precipitation, winds are from the west, 5 to 10 meters per second, temperature throughout the night and day around 0. In Moscow, cloudy weather with isolated snow, fog, and icy road conditions. Winds are from the south, night -4 to 6, during the day -1 to 3. This was information from the Oceanic Meteorological Center of Russia. I bid you farewell and all the best.